Welcome everyone to this reading exam revision session today. We're just going to give everyone one more minute to make sure they're set up with audio and that they're all ready to go, and then we'll get started. Perfect. So I'll just accept these students in, and now we'll kick off now. And so essentially welcome everyone to this session today on the reading section of the exam. I know there's only a few weeks left before the exam now, and so it's natural to really want to make the most of these last few weeks. And hopefully this session really does help you, if you've been preparing for reading for a long time, get a bit of extra practice in and really fine-tune your preparation and fine-tune a few things for the exam. And if you're someone who's only just recently started, hopefully it gives you all the essentials that you need to really pick up and make progress really quickly in this section. We've got a few questions coming through, which we will get to at the end of the exam. One question is asking around how equity works, which we can definitely run through at the end of the exam. And a few students as well asking about the possibility of getting feedback on their essays. There will be options of how you can do that later in the call as well. We'll potentially be running another Q&A call where we can run through those live. And potentially, if there's only a few students asking for that help, we can potentially do that after the lesson as well. And so we've got quite a few questions coming through. We will get into them later on, but let's get started into it. So essentially, before we get started, just leave behind the chat box to make sure that number one, you can hear me, you can see my screen, and you're ready to go. And then we'll get started. Perfect. Hi, Jake. Hi, Mish. Hi, Evan. Perfect. Lots coming through in the chat, which is good. And so basically, who's this session for? Well, as you all know by now, it's for students sitting the selective entry exam for admission into one of these 4 schools. So if you're looking to get into McGraw, Melbourne High, Nossal, or Suzanne Corey, this session really is to help you prepare for the exam you've got in just over 10 days' time from now. For a bit of context on me, I'm Charlie. If you don't know already, I graduated from Melbourne High, got an ATAR just below 98 of 97.65, and I've been teaching in the education space for quite a while now, having graduated almost getting close to 10 years. So I think it's about 8 years. It's gone quick, but I'm here to really help you prepare for the reading section of the exam. And so what are we covering? First thing is a really quick introduction to the reading section of the exam. Number 2, then we're going to go through how can you master passage problems. So as you would probably know by now, a lot of reading is going through these passages and being able to pick out answers quickly and accurately. And a lot of the time, these passages are long. Sometimes they're difficult to read. And so we'll be going through how you can really prepare on these ones. And then we'll also be going through a few tips and tricks from past students who've scored superiors that will hopefully give you an edge and just really boost your score a little bit in the last few weeks. And so let's get straight into that now. So a reading introduction. What is reading? Well, reading really measures your ability to read a passage of text and extract a specific piece of information or to demonstrate your understanding of the piece. And this is one of the biggest things, really, if you think about it from the examiner's perspective. What are they looking for? They're looking for students who can read these passages really quickly and extract key pieces of information to find the right answer. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the way that we're going to approach it. We're actually going to approach the section in a bit of a different way, where we're going to use techniques like scanning, where we're scanning the writing and we're just trying to extract the answer without having to read all these passages all the time, because often they are so long. And if you're trying to read all the passages, every single time it's going to be quite tricky. And if you really try to understand them to the level they would want, you're probably not going to get through the whole thing. And so we're going to be talking about the scan method. The other thing it does test is it also tests your language skills, including grammar, punctuation, and figurative language, as well as the depth and breadth of your vocabulary. In terms of what we know, so we know that there will be 35 minutes to answer a series of questions. ASA has changed this time limit, and there was one question in the chat box asking about how many questions they are. From the official sources of information, we do not have a confirmation of the number of questions. My guess, or it looks very likely that it's going to be either 50 or 60 questions. That's most likely. But on the official ASA website, they haven't specified the number of questions. And so my guess is it's probably slightly more than it was in the past, but we can't make any certainties of that. And so really, as it is with a lot of sections on this exam going into a new exam, we've really got to be open-minded, knowing that it could be slightly more questions than we expect, it could be slightly less. But the students who are agile, who are able to adapt and not get stressed, are going to be the ones who are really going to thrive on this exam. Because if you think about it, it is the first year of a new exam. There is a chance that it's just exactly what everyone expects. It's exactly the same as past year's exams, and there's very little changes despite it going from EduTest or ASA. But there is also a good chance that there's something a bit different, whether it's in the reading section, whether it's in another section, there's a chance that there's something that throws you off a little bit. And it's the students who are going to not be thrown off, who are going to compose themselves and do well anyway, that are going to have a big advantage. Got a question here. With extra 5 minutes, will that mean the passage will be more difficult to comprehend? And so there is a few sort of different ways of looking at it. It could be that there's more questions, the passages could be more difficult to comprehend. But what we do know, which is something that we'll go through later in this section, is generally they will intentionally give you passages which are longer than the average student can read. So we'll go into this later in more detail, but the average student reads at around 240 words per minute. Often they will give you passages that are 300 words, 400 words, 500 words, even up to 600 words, and you'll be meant to read that passage and find the answers within a minute. And so that is something that we're going to have to contend for. So that's something we're going to prepare for today. We're going to prepare for as if there is going to be some longer passages that are really going to push you, and you're going to need to know how to answer these ones quickly. And also we're going to go through some passages that are particularly dense and quite difficult. So if that does come up, you're going to be prepared. And so, yeah, time pressure, it's most likely to be extreme, as it is with all sections on this exam. But with reading, it could also just be the passages are difficult. So it could go one of two ways there. And of course, what are you aiming for? You're looking for a superior. This means your score will be in the top 11% of students. We've got a quick question here, which is it worth guessing as many questions as possible when there are 2 to 3 minutes left of the test? Yes, definitely. Like any multi-choice exam, we never want to leave any questions blank. So we want to make sure that every single question is filled out and it gives us a chance of getting it right. And we've got a question here. How many minutes do you want to wait until to guess? I would probably give yourself 2 minutes at the end, where anything you haven't done with 2 minutes left, just go down and fill it all out. And then make sure that's going to give you a chance of getting some of them correct. We've got a few students asking for my email so that they can get some extra help. I'll give that at the end of the session. Will just take me a bit of time to type it in the box, but don't worry. I'll be sending you all an email after this session with homework, the recording, a few things to help you in the last few weeks. And should you guess with different options or all the same, I would definitely recommend guessing all with the same option. The reason for that is if you guess with different options, there's a chance that you get none of them correct, which would be unfortunate. Whereas if you guess all C, for example, I'd probably guess either B or C. Statistically, that's generally the highest likelihood, C or B or C or D. I just guess all the same. And let's say if you guess 5, you're probably going to get at least 1, best case, maybe 2 or 3, but definitely guess all the same thing. And so let's kick off with mastering passage problems, which is really what a lot of the exam is. And so what are passage problems? Well, they present you with a passage of information that you have to first read and then identify the correct answer to a series of questions. So this is an example here. And of course, they can come in many different forms and topics, from non-fiction articles to narrative pieces, to interviews, to poetry, to interviews, and even cartoons. So there can be a lot of variety in the type of passage or the type of information that we're presented with. But really the core skill that they're testing is how quickly can we analyze this piece of information and extract the right answer. That's really the way that we want to look at it. How quickly can we extract the right answer rather than how well can we understand the whole holistic piece. Really all we want to understand is the bare minimum to get the correct answer. And we've got a few things here. In the exam, will there be a timer so we know how much time we have left? When I was in the exam, the way that they did it was there was a big clock. So I actually sat at a really large centre in Carlton. I think it's the exhibition building, and they just had clocks everywhere, and they start right at a specific time, and it's pretty easy to tell how much time they have left. And often they do also tell you like there's 5 minutes left. In the past, in some of them they did. Can you bring a non-smartwatch to keep track of time? This is something that changes year by year. And so I would recommend, I'll be able to forward through the ACER book, which is where they have their specific protocols, particularly because we've been switching from EduTest to ACER. I wouldn't want to tell you the wrong answer to that one, so I'll send you the book where we can have a look at that. And we've got someone saying, with James and tests, if you guess for the entire test, you'll get 11 out of 50 as the mean for 5 tests. Yeah, so that's interesting. And so it really does show, like, ideally, you don't really want to be guessing any. And there really is, in reading comprehension, there is time for you to finish all of them if you really know how to answer these questions quickly and accurately, which we'll be going through. But of course, there's no point leaving them blank. And so if you do have to guess, then guess. But of course, that's not the strategy that you would ideally be wanting to go with. And so really, what are the different types of questions you can be asked about a particular passage? So you've got this passage here, you can be presented with different types of questions. What are the different types of questions that you can expect to see? So one type is what we will call a holistic meaning question. And this is where the question assesses your ability to find the main point the overall feeling, or the key themes from the passage as a whole. So if you think about it, if it's a question like this, for example, a question that says, what was the author trying to convey in this passage, or what was the main theme, or what was the overall feeling of this piece? These types of questions obviously require a deeper level of understanding of the whole passage. It's not something where you can just zoom into one sentence and pick out the right answer. It does really require you to understand the information on a deeper level. And so these questions are harder just because they take more time to find. It's not like it's asking, for example, a specific date or a specific piece of information. And so when you see these questions, just note this is a harder question. It's probably going to take a little bit more time than some other questions. And so you will have to toss up. Do you have time for it? Should you skip it for later? Or can you allocate a little bit more time for this one because there's some other ones which are extremely fast and you're progressing well through the exam. So that's the first type, holistic meaning questions. Second type is specific information questions. This is a lot easier. So this is where it's really just testing your ability to find a specific piece of information. So for example, if it was an essay around the royal family, it might say, when was the Queen born? And they'll have that information there. It might say, what is the setting of this passage? But it's really looking for you to find a specific piece of information. And the good thing about these types of questions is they're a lot easier, they're a lot faster. You generally don't have to understand the entire piece of writing, and you generally can just search for it using the scan method, which we'll go through, and just pick out the right answer. And so these are the types of ones where you really do want to make sure you answer all of them because they're generally pretty easy to get the correct answer. Question type 3, inference questions. So this question type assesses your ability to infer information from the passage. Again, this means it's a little bit more difficult. So it requires some more reasoning skills and time to really find the right answer, as you're forced to think beyond what's on the written page. And the example is, what was the character mainly doing in this passage? Or what do you think the motives of this character was in this passage? It's looking for information that it's not strictly written down on the page. You kind of have to think and understand the piece and search for the answer yourself. And so again, very similar to like the first type of question 1, holistic questions. It takes a little bit more time than something like a specific information question where you can just find the right piece of information without understanding the piece. Last major bucket of questions is around understanding words or phrases questions. And this is really where it's testing your vocab knowledge. How well do you understand the subtleties and nuances between different words and different phrases and what the author's saying in their use of words and language? And so for an example, that would be the word eloquent delight in this passage means that, and you have to explain what that means. And so this one, again, is potentially a little bit easier. And sometimes it is also something that you can answer on your own without even reading the passage. So this is one of the hacks which some students do use well, which we'll go into exactly how to use this. But often with some questions, like let's say if the exam's got 50 questions, you're not going to be able to do it with all 50 questions. But sometimes there is a couple of questions, maybe 2 or 3, where it's on a subject that you already know about. It's on a topic that you already know about, or the answer is already obvious and you can actually pick the answer without even reading the passage. And that is a strategy that some students use to get a few extra questions correct without having to read the whole passage. And we'll go into more detail around how that would actually work later. But the first thing is the 3 steps for success. So these are the 3 key things that I do when approaching the reading section of the exam. Just before we move into that section, let's have a look if there's a few key questions which we will go through. So how many people got in at your school? So the school that I was at was Brighton Secondary, and so it wasn't one of the biggest feeders of students to Melbourne High. So I think there was 4 students, which is still quite a lot realistically, given that there was around 120 students in the year level. Stephen said, isn't it better to make educated guesses? Yes, of course, if you have time, better to make an educational guess. If you can quickly wipe out a few answers, that is much better than randomly guessing. But in saying that, if you have no time and you have no time to read all of them, it's better to do random guesses than nothing. So I kind of say the tier is number 1, answer them properly. Number 2, educated guesses. Number 3, if you really don't have time, then just pick something. Olivia said, should you guess all B or C, which is more likely to be correct? It's hard to know. Like every exam, there's going to be one of those letters which is better. It could even be, of course, A or D or any of the other options. Generally, we've seen from past exams, B or C is often better. But I think just go with what you feel like is going to give you the best chance on the day. We've got a question here, which is, from Nikhil, which is if you know the definition of the word, should you read the sentence that has the word in the passage or just answer the definition you know? So this is a good question. It's essentially asking if you already know the answer to the question, just based on your prior knowledge, should you bother reading the passage or should you just answer it directly? If you know for certain it's the correct answer, then just circle it. If there is a few answers where it could be between two and it's a little bit more iffy, then I would probably just check it's correct and just spend 20 seconds just quickly finding that piece of information. Question, does ASA marker working? No, they do not. It just comes down to multi-choice. Looks like that was a unanimous answer there. Did you have tutoring for your exam? Yes, I did. Making educated guesses better than guessing all C or B. Educated guesses is definitely better. Okay, so we've got quite a few questions, which is good, lots of engagement. We will keep moving on. There's a few questions about how many students will specifically get in from Werribee College or from other schools. Really, the main thing is like, generally it's a maximum of 4% of students. However, it could be less, it could be 1% of students, it could be more. Really, it just depends on how well you do on the exam. Of course, for example, if there's some schools where a lot of students get high grades and a lot of them get in through the principal's discretion and through the equity considerations. And so the best thing you can do is just make sure you get high scores. Realistically, when I was at Melbourne High, all the students there, they got good scores. And so if you do that, you're going to be well set up for success. Is it 4% of students from the cohort or from the people who try? It's 4% from the cohort. From the students. It's 4% of the students in your year level at school, from my understanding. And so let's get into the 3 steps for success. So first step is, I'm not sure, depending on how long people have been preparing for, how comfortable they are with this. The first thing is make sure you read the question first. The biggest mistake you can make is reading the passage first. It just really wastes so much time. If you think about it, and if you look at students who read the passage first, they'll read the passage, then they'll read the question, then they'll think, oh, I can't really remember anything from the passage. They'll go back and read the passage again, and they've wasted a huge amount of time. And the key thing to remember here is, as you're only reading the passage to extract very specific pieces of information, it's essential to start with the question first. So you start with the question, then you read the passage. And when you're reading the passage, you're not reading it idly. You're not thinking, I just want to understand this passage just for fun. You're reading this passage with the intention of finding a specific answer. And if you find an answer straight away, great, that's it. And same thing, if you think you know where that information would be housed, which is one of the secrets that we'll go through later. If you, for example, know it asks for the conclusion of the passage, don't read the whole passage, go to the end. If it asks for the introduction, go to the introduction. If it's for asking for an advantage of this specific thing, then it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle. We don't want to bother reading the whole passage if we don't have to, and we always want to read the question first. This is also built into another warning, which is some questions on the reading section of the exam really are there to waste your time. So like I remember on my year in particular, I think there was one passage which was 2 pages long. It was a ridiculous amount. It would probably take you 5 minutes to read it. That's the type of one where if you do have time to come back to it at the end, which I actually didn't have time to, then just note it down. You can come back to that later. But they're the ones you do really want to be guessing. You don't want to be or making educated guesses. You don't want to really be leaving easy questions. You want to be leaving questions like that for me on my exam, where it's just pages and pages of passage. I remember it was extremely dense. It was on some sort of historical text, which was very difficult for me to understand. And so I skipped that one right at the end. In the last 5 questions, I remember there were some super easy ones asking for specific pieces of information that took me 1 second to pluck out. And so be very careful of that. If there will sometimes, or very often, be a question that's a lot of students will waste time on. And so you do want to make sure that you don't do that. A few questions coming through. How much time does reading comprehension go for? It goes for 35 minutes according to ASA. Should you read the questions before reading the passage? Yes, that's generally what I would recommend. That's a strategy that I've seen work really well. You read the question, then you go back to the passage. This isn't something that just works on this exam, but in year 12, for example, students have to sit an exam called the UCAT, which there's an exact same section similar to this, where there's passages. That's the strategy everyone uses. All the students who get 99th percentile, top 1% scores, they read the question first, then they read the passage. It just saves a lot of time. Should we read every question first or one question at a time? What I would personally do is I would read both questions very quickly, and then I just pick the first one, have that fresh in my brain, and then go searching for that information, then go back to the second question, and then go back to the passage. Should we first read both questions? Yeah, so I would quickly have a look at both of them, and then I would narrow in on the first one and just look for the first one's information firstly. Got a question here, was the tutoring questions harder than the one on the test? For me, the questions that I did in tutoring was pretty similar to the test. The exam hadn't changed when I did it, so it had been the same exam for a long period of time, whereas this year it is the first year of ASA, so the questions could be slightly more difficult or slightly more easy. However, from my experience, the questions that most tutoring companies, most select entry admissions companies have are pretty similar with what you can expect. What is the least we need to get into a selective school, like 3 superiors or 2 averages or what? Generally, yeah. 3 superiors is really what you want to be aiming for. If you do have more superiors, you can get away with some lower marks in some sections. So for example, I know a lot of students who got 3 superiors, some even 4 superiors, and they'll have one score which was extremely poor, let's say average, and they still got in because they had the superiors. Superiors really does give you a massive advantage. And so if you can get a few superiors, it does make a big exam. And so it does make a big impact. And so, yeah, so let's keep moving. First thing, read the question first, then go back to the passage. If there's multiple questions, read both of them, then narrow in on the first one that you're just looking to actually find the answer for, then go back to the passage. Then what I'd recommend, rather than reading the piece of writing as if it was just like a book that you were reading lazily on the weekend, we want to use the scan method, which is where you're looking for keywords. And essentially what this means, what is the scan method? It involves you quickly scanning the passage, looking for specific keywords or information required by the question. And so it does depend on the question here. If the question is to understand the holistic meaning of the piece, just scanning for an answer to that question is not going to be super effective. In that case, you are going to have to try and read quickly, which is something we'll go through later, but you do need to understand a little bit to get that answer. But for a lot of the questions where it's looking for a specific piece of information, or it is something you can scan for, this method is really crucial. So the first thing you should always try is see if the scan method will work, which means you scan through looking to search for the answer. And only then, if that doesn't work, then you read the passage. And you will be able to shortcut that to some extent because some questions you'll know you will need to read it. But for a lot of questions, you won't need to, and you want to use the scan method. And so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to put this into practice. And we're going to see, sorry, I'm just having a quick look at the questions. Looks like we will get back to them after this. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few questions. We're going to go through one which is easier. We're going to go through a few which is medium. And then we're going to go through one which is harder. We just have a hand raised from Olivia saying, does English matter more or maths matter more? They all count the same in the end. All 5 sections matter the same. And you do have to do well in most of them, really, to get into the selective school. And so what we're really going to be focusing on now as we go into this passage, I'll just put it quickly on the screen and then I'll take it away, is you're going to be focusing on 2 things. The first one, read the question first, then look for the answer in the text. The second thing is scan for the information. Don't read all the information. Just try and find the answer as fast as you can. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 60 seconds now to get these 2 questions correct. What I'm going to do is as soon as you've got your answers, leave them in the chat, and then we will grade them together. And so just as a warning, this first passage is more on the easy side. On my exam, there was maybe around 5 marks around this difficulty. So there is some which are around this difficulty, but definitely not all of them. And so I'm going to give you 60 seconds when you've got the correct answer, leave it in the chat. So let's get started now. Time's up. So it looks like a lot of students have done well on this. A lot of B's, a lot of C's as well. I'll just let everyone put their answers in. Got a few students saying that the method is helpful so far, which is good. So as you can see with this one, a lot of students got it correct. And let's have a quick look and see how they went. So the first question was, what was one of the key innovations that fueled the Industrial Revolution? So as we talked about, read the question first, then just quickly scan for the information. And if you scan, we can see here the steam engine was one of the key innovations that fueled the Industrial Revolution. Done. So correct answer was B. Looks like almost everyone got that question correct. So well done. As you can see here, at this point, I have no idea what most of this passage says. All I know is the correct answer, which is all we need. The second question then, question 2, which is what were some of the negative consequences of the Industrial Revolution. Looks like everyone has gone with C for this one. C. Yeah. So it looks like everyone's gone with C, which is correct. And so there's a few things here. One thing, people who just skip straight for the information would have saved time, which is good. But if you look at these answers as well, what were some of the negative consequences of the Industrial Revolution? Increased job opportunities, that's not negative. Higher wages, that's not negative. Improved living standards, not negative. Efficient transportation systems, not negative. And so there's 2 ways you could have gone with this. You could have searched for the information just to check it's correct. But in this case, you probably could have made it a safe bet that dangerous working conditions was the only negative one of those options, and you probably could have just circled it. And if you think about it, how much time would that save you? Maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, which is going to come in handy. There's going to be some questions where you want that extra time. And so if you ever can just find the correct answer based on your own knowledge. So for example, some students are going to know that the steam engine was a key innovation that fueled the Industrial Revolution. You might have just studied it at school, you might have read a book on it, you might know that information somehow, and if you know it, then just get it correct and just save the time. And so that was really good. Seems like everyone did well with this first question. The next one we're going to be looking at is one which is a bit more difficult. It is probably, I'd say, a medium level question. And so I'm going to get the timer up. We're going to have 60 seconds again. And we can get started with this next one. So there's 2 questions for you to do. There's a passage, read the question, then look for the information. Let's get started now. Leave your answers in the comments when you're done. Ten seconds left. Time is up. Well done, everyone. Looks like everyone who has finished, from what I've seen, has got the correct answers. So let's break it down now. So the first one, what is the process by which the brain changes and reorganizes itself in response to new experiences and information? Again, what we want to do with this one, we don't want to read the whole passage, we just want to scan for it. What I'd scan for is, this is really where we want to use something which is called the keyword scanning method. And so I'd have a quick look at these 5 words, and I would even just scan through as if it was a crossword puzzle where you're looking for specific words. I would just look for these words. And if you can find one of them, then I'd see the information around it. So for example, what I'd do is I start scanning here, N, neurons, no, that's not it. Okay, neuroplasticity is the basis of our ability to acquire new skills. And I'd say, okay, there's the information there. And so, yeah, there's essentially a few key things to take away from this. Number 1, we want to be obviously scanning. We don't want to be reading really slowly, but also we want to use the keyword method. And so we can look at these answers. We know they will start with N. Let's go through, find all the words that start with N, which is capitalized, and see if we can find that word straight away. And so in this case, the correct answer for 1 was C. Again, this is the type of question where some students are going to know that This ability for the brain's ability to change and reorganize itself is called neuroplasticity. Someone asked, if you already knew this information, can you just put it down? Yes, you can. You don't have to read the passage if you already know the answer to the question, but it is something where you want to be really careful of that. It's like, you don't want it to just be something where you think it's correct. You want to make sure that, okay, I know that that's definitely correct, therefore I can pick that correct answer. We've also got one question from Olivia, which is saying, are the difficult questions at the start of the test or the end of the test? It really is pretty varied. What I have found is often there is a few easy questions at the end, but there's also often some easy ones at the start. And so I would really just work through it in order, but I would really just note if there is a really difficult question that's like 3 pages long or 2 pages long or something crazy, and you just know this is a silly question, no one can realistically do this within 60 seconds or 30 seconds for each individual question, then just skip it. And so question 2 was, how can knowledge of how the human brain learns benefit education? Looks like for this one, a lot of students have gone with a few C's, A, yeah. And so let's look, how can knowledge of the human brain learns benefit education? What I would quickly do is I'd quickly look at the piece. You can see here this paragraph starts with education. So that's a big clue that probably this is where the information is going to be housed. I quickly scan through here. Education is another realm profoundly influenced by understanding the brain. Recognizing how the brain learns and processes information helps educators tailor their teaching strategies to optimize student learning. By incorporating these strategies that align with the brain's inclination, educators can create engaging and effective learning experiences. So I'd say it's probably, yeah, agree. A, optimize teaching practices, because they're optimizing based on their understanding of the brain. And so, yeah, that's really the key thing you want to focus on here. Scan, so read the question first, then scan the passage. A helpful clue for scanning the passage is to pick a keyword and look for that keyword. In this case, we know that there would have to be the word education in it. So if we could find where we talked about education in the piece, it saves you running through the whole piece. Because that's one thing, if you think about it, some students are going to see education and they're going to start all the way at the top and they're going to read all the way down through here to get to education again. Whereas if you knew, okay, we're looking for information about education, let's go straight there. And someone said, what if it's told like a story and asks for a theme? Well, if it's a story, then you can still use this, but you need to apply it in a different way. So for example, what happens at the start of a story? Often there's context given around the characters, the setting, some basic things around plot and background information. And so that information, for example, is probably going to be at the start. What happens at the end of the piece? There's often a conclusion. There's often some sort of takeaways from the character or from the plot as a whole. If it asks around some sort of conflict or some sort of meaty part of the story, that's probably going to be in the middle. And so Dominic said, I just scanned the last paragraph as I assumed that they would talk about that in the last paragraph in the info and then conclusion sort of structure. Is this effective for these inferencing and harder questions in reading? Yes, it is. I would always use that as your first approach. Just quickly check a specific spot. If it's not there, then feel free to go through the whole piece. But if you think about it, there's no harm from just trying to find it straight away. Worst case, like most of the time, you're probably going to find it. Sometimes if you don't find it, that's fine. You just read through it in order as everyone else would do, and you haven't really lost much time. Generally, it's going to work in your favor more than it's not. Are there more story passages or essay types in the exam? It's pretty varied. In my year, there was a lot of historical kind of ones. I think there maybe was one cartoon one, and there was a few poetry ones, which were quite difficult, but there's generally quite a bit of variety because they want to, if you think about it from their perspective, they wouldn't just put all the one type of piece because they want to see what's your ability to understand different types of texts. They don't want to just pick students in selective schools who are really good at understanding poetry. They want to see how you're really good at decoding different types of passages and information. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to do another example. We're going to go through one which is, again, medium. It's maybe a little bit more difficult. So far, everyone's done pretty well with these ones. We're going to start to really ramp up the speed now. And essentially what that means is there's a few things here. So this first passage, which most students found easy, the reason that a lot of students, and really everyone in the exam is going to find this easy, is this is 190 words, this passage. And the average person reads at about 240 words per minute. And so that means everyone's going to have time to read this, and most people are going to have time to find the answers. And so even if the questions were difficult, a lot of students are still going to find the answers. This one, however, The passage is 560 words. It's almost 2 times the average person's reading speed. So that makes it tough. But what makes it easy is it's asking for specific pieces of information. You didn't have to understand this piece. You could just use the scan method and find these pieces of information. And so students who use the method like we've talked about, and as we also saw with this one, you could all pick out the information pretty easily. This next question, it's going to be slightly more difficult. And so let's have a go at this one. I'm going to give you all 60 seconds once again. And so I will get started right now. Leave your answers in the comments when you're ready. Let's go. Time's up. So this one was a little bit more difficult, and there has been more variety in the answers. And this is something that I would just note. So I'd say probably from everyone who's put in their answers, with the first 2 questions, almost everyone got them correct. With this one, it was maybe 20%. And so what that means is, if you think about it on the exam, poetry in general is a section that a lot of students struggle with. And so if you think you've got 11 days left, what's the type of question where you probably want to do more practice? Poetry is definitely one of them. It's a section which I remember when I was reading, it's very difficult to often understand. Particularly on my exam, I remember there were some really difficult pieces. And so it is a section where if you could spend some more time specifically on poetry in the next few weeks, that's probably going to give you a big advantage over other students. Got a few questions here saying, with these poetry ones, can you still skim and scan, or should you just read the first verse, for example? Poetry is a little bit different sometimes, but it depends on what the question's asking for. For example, if it was asking for a specific piece of information, if it said, where were the words flowing freely, and you could just scan and find out from the depths of the poet's soul, then there's no point reading the whole piece because it was asking for a specific piece of information. It's kind of that specific information type of question that we talked about. But if it's a question like, what is the main theme of this poem? Reading one sentence or scanning information is not going to tell you the main theme of this poem. Luckily, this piece was a bit shorter, so we should have had time to go through it, but that doesn't mean it was easy to get the correct answer. And so what is the main theme of this poem? What I would do is, again, I would read the question first. So, okay, I know when I'm reading this piece, I'm reading with the intention of finding the theme. As soon as I feel like I have a good understanding of the theme, then I'm going to go ahead with it. And so it starts off with, in the land of dreams and make-believe, where fantasies and wonders conceive, there lies a realm of pure imagination, a place of magical transformation. So at this point, after reading just this first sentence, there's probably a few which are ruled out. Poetry and verses is obviously not, or is not the main theme, because it's a poem, but the theme is, well, could potentially be around poetry. So actually all of these options are still in play realistically. In this realm where dreams take flight, where stars shine bright in the darkest night, creativity dances in the ethereal air, unveiling a world beyond compare. From the depth of the poet's soul, words flow freely, taking their toll, verses woven with delicate grace, painting emotions across time and space. So to me, it sounds like it's really about the process of being a poet and writing a poem, and that process of creativity and pure imagination, as it says. Through the stanzas of lyrical prose, a story unfolds where the heart knows. In this enchanted realm of ink and rhyme, the power of words transcend all time. And so to me, if I just didn't look at the answers, what's it about? I'd say it's about poetry, and it's about the creativity and the imagination that goes into poetry. And of course, I saw the word imagination here, so that's why I used it. But yeah, that's the answer that I'll go with. A, dreams and make-believe. That would make me think it's a bit more mystical. Doesn't really hint on the fact that this is all about writing, poetry, transformation and magic. Again, that's not really the essence of poetry. Poetry and verses, it was a bit beyond just that. And freedom of expression, so I'd say it was A. which looks like a lot of students went with. And yes, the correct answer was A. Same thing with what is the purpose of the verses in this poem? Let's have a look at the answers. So to evoke emotions and paint a vivid picture. That one sounds pretty promising. To provide factual information, definitely not. To tell a chronological story, it does provide a chronological story, but is that the purpose? Was the purpose to provide a chronological story? I would say it wasn't the purpose. It potentially was some sort of a story. Even that is debatable. To entertain readers with humorous anecdotes. Was that the purpose when the author wrote this? I would say probably not. Or to explore philosophical concepts. Again, potentially you could say that, but I'd say again A, which is the correct answer, which a lot of students have chosen. And so really the key thing with these ones is it is something which poems are difficult to understand. A lot of students are going to get these ones incorrect. And so if you can spend more time in these last 10 days focusing on poetry, it is really at a point now where there's not a huge amount of time left. You don't want to be doing questions if it's an area where you've got a lot of confidence already. Pick your weak sections, identify within reading comprehension or reading, which questions are you strong at? Of course, you want to refine them. You want to make sure you're really fast at them and you get faster so you can save time for the more difficult questions. But poetry is an area where I'll probably recommend focusing because a lot of students are going to get it incorrect. If, for example, you got all the poetry questions correct, that's going to give you a massive advantage over everyone else. And it's going to immediately push you into that next echelon. So we'll just let students in who are still joining now. Is there more than 2 questions on each passage? Yes. Often there is more than 2. Sometimes there's a minimum of 2. However, or sometimes there's even 1, but it can range for sure. We have got a few questions. So Dominic has said he generally rules out the obviously wrong ones. In this case, poetry and verses is wrong because it's actually in the poem. So the theme should be deeper after reading most of the poem. Is this a good strategy? Yes, this is a very good strategy. You don't want to be looking to see if these answers are correct, if you can obviously rule them out. And this is a good thing to do across all of them. As we looked at with some of the past questions, for example, with this one. With question 2, if we had ruled out all the ones that were obviously wrong, we probably would have only had 1 answer left. And we're probably not always going to be in that situation, but often it's going to rule it down to 2 or at worst 3, which is going to make it a lot easier and a lot faster to get the correct answer. We'll just go with one more question before we keep going. Which percentage would be a superior in each subject? And this is a good question. Typically, what we know is it's definitely not 100%. There's generally always room to get a few questions wrong. The biggest difficulty is that this year it is the first year of the ACER exam. And so what's been true in the past could be correct, but it could also not be correct. And so I'd say it's very difficult to say with certainty what that correct answer would be. And so I'd probably just say, realistically, it's not going to be full marks. If you got 47 out of 50, that's going to be a good score. Whether it's what grade it is, you cannot definitely say because it depends on different things. Probably the main thing to think about is ultimately these scores are a rank. So like, for example, superior, what is it? It's top 11% of students. So some years, if the exam was more difficult, if by moving to ACER, everyone gets freaked out, everyone's like, wow, I've been prepared for all these questions, they're different from what people expect, a superior could be quite low. Whereas if it's very similar to a lot of the questions that students have been preparing for, it could be a lot higher. And so really, you just want to be aiming for as high as you can, but it's very difficult to say what that score would be. Someone said, is 70% likely to be a superior? Someone said maybe an above average or high average, yeah. From what I've seen in the past, that sounds about right, but it really does depend, yeah. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through one more question, which is, again, sort of medium level, a little bit more difficult potentially than some of the other ones. And let's see how we go. So we've got 60 seconds here. Again, let's really take the learnings that we've had so far, which is focusing on the question first, ruling out, as a few students have mentioned, any answers if you can, and then searching for the answer. If you can't search for the answer, that's when you go through and read the passage. few students have asked about reading speed. How can you improve your reading speed? And this is what we'll be going through next. So we're going to do a couple more practice questions, just really get some practice in on some of these more difficult ones. And then let's do some practice on reading speed. So we've got 60 seconds now. Let's get started. Put your answers in the comments when you're ready. Let's go. We've got some B's, we've got some, for the first one, we've got some A's, quite a scattering of questions. We've got one student who said they would probably leave this question and come back to it at the end. That would possibly be a smart strategy. BA, okay, got lots of different options here. And so for context, how many words is this passage? This passage is about 600 words. So it's about 2.5 times the speed that the average student can read at. Of course, most of you are going to be reading this passage as fast as you can, so you probably got through quite a bit of it looking for the answers. But how do we approach this question? This really is the type of question where realistically, if you try to read through this entire passage and understand it, it's quite difficult to understand and it's quite long. And so you're probably not going to be able to do it. The only way you're going to get a question like this correct is through the scan method, through saying, okay, what phenomenon occurs within the event horizon of a black hole, altering the laws of physics? And I'd say, okay, so we're looking for black hole. Something to do with black hole is what we're looking for. And I would scan for black hole and then I'd read the information around that. And so I'll be scanning. Yeah, black hole. Okay. So among the stellar ballot that graces the cosmic stage, a formidable entity commands attention, the black hole. Possessing an inconceivable density, it stands as a cosmic abyss from which neither matter nor light can escape. Within the confines of its event horizon, the fabric of space-time undergoes an extraordinary contortion, culminating in the formation of a singularity. An infinitesimal point where the very laws of physics cease to hold sway. And so I'd say which phenomenon occurs within the event horizon. I would say it is C, singularity. And I can see a lot of students here have chosen B, and I can see why students chose that, because it does mention there is black hole, and very quickly after it does talk about the event horizon. It says within the confines of its event horizon. However, when it really goes into details, it says the fabric of space-time undergoes an extraordinary contortion, culminating in the formation of a singularity. And so I'd say what happens within this, I would say it is the cosmic singularity. The other thing which really suggests that's the answer is it says altering the laws of physics. And it says here where the laws of physics reach their limits. So that suggests, that is interesting. It is clashing. C is the correct answer. This is one which is quite difficult because there is a lot of subtlety to it. So we've got a student saying, can you explain it again? Yes, we can run through that one again. So basically, what method would I use for this one? First thing, read the question, pick the keyword which you're going to look for the information for. Black hole is probably where you're going to find this information. I'll pick black hole. I'll go and find it in this piece. It says black hole here. And so I'd read these sentences. So it says, among the stellar ballot that graces the cosmic stage, a formidable entity commands attention, the black hole. So that hasn't given us any information yet. Possessing an inconceivable density, it stands as a cosmic abyss from space from which neither matter nor even light can escape. Again, no information just yet, which helps us pick one of these answers. Within the confines of its event horizon. And so this part here, which says within the confines of its event horizon, that's kind of like setting the stage for this question. So what phenomenon occurs within the event horizon? So now I'd say whatever's after this information is going to be the answer. the fabric of space-time undergoes an extraordinary contortion, culminating in the formation of a singularity. And so I'd say, okay, singularity looks like the correct answer because it's come after that key question. And so that's essentially how I'd approach that question. As a recap, read the question, pick the keyword, scan for that keyword, find where that keyword is, read that information, and pick the answer. I do think this is a question that's pretty achievable to get. However, you do really need to use that method. If you just try to understand the whole piece, it's going to be extremely difficult. So for 1, the correct answer was C. For 2, let's run through again. So again, I'd use the same strategy, which is by what mechanism do black holes emit energy? Often witnesses powerful jets and gamma ray emissions. And so I would pick a word here to look for the scanning method. I'd say we know that we just read the information about the black hole, and that didn't tell me anything about energy. And so I'll probably look for something like gamma ray emissions, potentially. I'll look to see where that is. So I'll start, scan through. There we go. Okay, potent jets and gamma ray emissions. So we know the answer is going to be somewhere around here. The fierce interplay of matter within these disks generates an immense heat, propelling the release of energy in the form of potent jets and gamma ray emissions. So it's talking here about disks. So I'd say accretion disks is probably going to be the correct answer. Let's see if we can actually find accretion disk somewhere here, which we can. Okay. So yeah, so it looks like it is accretion disks. And so I'd go with D. And so really what's difficult about these questions is the writing's dense, so it's difficult to understand, and you really need to read it closely. If you're like what we are like on a lot of the questions, we're just sort of scanning really quickly, it's not going to work. And so you do want to read the question, pick your keyword, find that keyword and the information that's going to help you find the answer. But you really do need to then, when you're reading that information here, really focus and really say, okay, I need to focus now. I need to read this carefully. I really need to understand what these few sentences mean. Not the entire piece, but just these few sentences I need to understand them really closely to pick the correct answer. And so the correct answer here was D, accretion disks. And really what was, from what we've seen, students who got this correctly, it's probably the ones who did have that time to really focus and understand the piece, but it is difficult. And this is the type of question where a lot of students are going to get it incorrect. It is going to be one of the more medium to probably much harder questions. And so, yeah, I think if you found it difficult, that's okay. This is one of the more medium and probably more on the top end of difficulty questions. One question here, do you skim and scan this, or do you skim and scan this, or do you make an educated guess? Personally, with this one, I would have tried to do it as we've done. I would have scanned it because I think the information was there, but it was right on the edge of being one that you would leave out. And so we're going to do one last question, which is tipping from medium to hard. I'd say this one's medium to hard. This next one is probably, in my opinion, as hard as it gets. The reason for that is it's a long passage, so it's actually the same passage, so that's going to give you a bit of an advantage. But it's asking not just for specific pieces of information. So what would have really made me do these questions is they are just asking for specific pieces of information, whereas the next ones are going to be asking for more broader information, which you may not be able to just extract. And so we'll just have a quick question here, which is, which tuition centres have the highest exams in your opinion? Which tuition do you think makes exams most close to the actual exam? This is a question which is very difficult to answer just because the exam is moving from EduTest to ASA. So in the past, realistically, most of the major ones that most of you would have been attending, for example, James Ann, Henderson's, a lot of these ones, the types of questions are generally pretty standard, pretty similar. Like most companies realistically have a good understanding of the different sections of the exam. And so if you're wondering how realistically the question is going to be, in the past, the questions were extremely realistic. This year, it's hard to say, but my guess is that they probably will be pretty realistic. One more question, which is maybe a little bit off topic for reading, but we'll go through it anyway. Do persuasive matter more or narrative matter more? They matter the same. And so within that writing section of the exam, there's going to be 2 prompts. That's all we know for sure. There's 40 minutes. There's 2 prompts. That's all we know. What those prompts are going to be, we do not know. Or what they're going to be on, whether it's persuasive or creative or something else unknown, we do not know. But the best guess is creative and persuasive. And whatever those 2 prompts are will count towards the same amount. Am I going to give you homework for reading? Yes, we'll be providing some resources at the end to help your preparation. And so let's now do, you've got just 40, actually I'm going to give you 60 seconds on this one, because the reason we're going to give 60 seconds is even though you've already read the passage, so realistically you probably wouldn't have this much time. This is the type of harder question where ideally you would dedicate a bit more time. There'll be a few easy ones where maybe you spend less time, and a few harder ones where you spend more time. And so I'm going to put the timer on for 60 seconds, and we're going to get started with this question now. When you have the answers, leave it in the comments. Let's go. Time's up. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with question 4, because I think this was probably the easier one. Question 4, which is the writing style can be best described as, and if you read this information, you can probably straight away see that it is written on a topic which is quite sciencey, which is the universe, but it does have a lot of words like a domain of celestial enigmas unfold, the realm where profound secrets lie in wait. And so we can probably, as one of the students mentioned earlier, you can probably rule out, for example, informative and scientific, analytical and logical, persuasive and argumentative. You can probably rule out really all of them, because there's something a bit different about this writing, in that it's not just an essay, it's not just sort of a very factual piece. It has a bit more vibrancy to it and a bit more creativity to it. For example, in this last sentence, through the tireless endeavors, the dance of stars and galaxies unfolds before their discerning gaze gradually illuminating the grand cosmic narrative. So again, narrative was potentially an option, but narrative wasn't really the piece in this one. Looks like we've got someone annotating on the screen, so we might just leave that for now. But essentially, yeah, in this one, if you look at all these answers, really poetic and evocative is the best way of describing it. I do think this one's something that's pretty possible for students to get correct, because even if you just read a little bit here, it does really give you the right answer. And so correct answer for number 4 here was A. That was the correct answer. And I do think if you just use the process of elimination and you had read through this based on these past questions, it is one which is pretty possible to get. This first one, though, is quite difficult. So which literary device is prominently used to create a sense of grandeur and awe? This is one that was really quite difficult. So we've got a few students saying, can I explain question 4 again? Yes, we can. So basically the way I would have gone through this question is this writing style can best be described as, and I would have gone through and first used a process of elimination, and I would have probably been able to eliminate all of them aside from the correct answer, which was A. The reason for that, if you look at this piece, let's go through each option. Is it informative and is it scientific? Yes, but it's also has a bit more creativity to it. All these words around the grand cosmic narrative and celestial enigmas unfolds in a realm where profound secrets lie in wait. That's not normally what you'd see in an informative and scientific piece. Think if you're reading a textbook on science, would they speak in this way? No. And so I'd probably say, no, that's not the correct answer. Same thing as narrative and descriptive. It is written in quite a narrative way and a descriptive way. It is quite descriptive. However, if you think about it, ultimately it is a non-fiction piece as well. It's not a story. It's not a narrative about someone. And so I would say no. Analytical and logical. Is it analytical? Is it logical? I would say there is some elements to this. However, it's not the key thing. It has other elements as well. So I'd say no. Persuasive and argumentative. I'd say again here, if you compare this to the types of pieces that you're writing in the writing section for persuasive pieces, probably not as well. And so I'd say definitely evocative. It is quite sort of evocative. Anish here says it's kind of in a poetic style with the figurative language. Yeah, I'd say it is kind of in a poetic style. Is it the type of poem you would expect to see? Not normally, it's a little bit different potentially. But I'd say this was probably the best option. I just think all the other ones weren't an option. And so that's why I would have gone with this one. It is more poetic and it is more evocative than any of these other ones, which we probably could rule out. And so, yeah, the correct answer here was A. The first one, to be honest, question 3 here, this is one that most of the time, it's going to take you a long time to get this correct answer. And a lot of students struggled with this one, a lot of students got this one incorrect. And so I would probably say this is one that I would have skipped. I would have came back to later if I had the time. The correct answer was C, so it was alliteration and imagery. There was some alliteration within this piece, there was some imagery. But realistically, I would say it requires a lot of understanding. To get this answer correct, you have to read through it well, you have to understand how many metaphors, how much alliteration, how many similes, how much satire. And so I would say it's probably one you want to skip. I'd say as a whole, the way I would look at it, if we look at all the questions we've done together, these 2 hard ones, most students are going to get incorrect. This is probably the level of that one hard question on my exam where I skipped it and I just randomly guessed. So it is worth preparing for these questions because there is a chance you race through it and you get them all correct. But realistically, this is not going to be representative of the type of the exam. So don't look at this question and think you're not prepared. This is at best going to be a couple of questions, and there's a chance that you get lucky and there's no questions at this level of difficulty. More likely, a lot of the questions are going to be, there's going to be some really easy ones like this one. There's going to be a lot of moderately difficult ones like this one and like this one. And there's going to be a section of questions like this where the topic's a little bit more difficult, it's a little bit more dense, it's a bit harder to read, but it's not impossible. Whereas these ones, it's probably tipping to the edge where it's more just there to sort of waste students' time and really trick students up. And so if you found this one difficult, that's okay. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's worth being aware of these types of questions do exist, but I wouldn't be structuring my preparation around these types of questions. So just before we move on to the next part, I'm going to have a quick look at the chat and see how everyone's going. So we've got a few questions. Can we go over persuasive before the end of the class? We won't be going through that today, but there will be the option for more classes this week where we can break down essays. If you're interested, looks like students found these ones a little bit more difficult. So it looks like students are asking for a bit of interest, a bit of support on essays, which will be available later in the week. So I will go through that at the end of the lesson. Let's move forward with the rest of the class. And so sometimes, as we've seen, the passage will be too long or it will be too complicated, or the question will be too nuanced to use the scan method. The scan method's great. It will work for you a lot of the time, but it won't always work. And when it doesn't work, this is where you want to really look to step 3. And this is speed reading. And so this is where you've decided you have to read the passage. And it's about how can you read the passage as fast as possible, because you have to read it. There's no other way of getting the correct answer if you don't do this. And so what does this mean? So essentially, the biggest thing with speed reading is you want to first understand how fast you currently read, and then we want to figure out a way of getting you faster. So in terms of what's average, the average reading speed is around 230 to 40 words per minute. A good reader will be around 400 words per minute. A bad reader will be around 110 words per minute. I doubt anyone on this call is at that level. And an excellent, accomplished reader who is a speed reading expert will be at about 1,000 words per minute. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a few things. The first one, I'm going to give you a website to go to where you can test your own speed reading abilities. We're going to do that now. It will only take you about 30 seconds. And then from there, we're going to give you 2 techniques that are going to allow you to boost that reading speed, and one which you can work on after this lesson to continue to improve it over the next few weeks. And so first thing, let's understand your current reading speed. Average is 240 words per minute. Olivia said, how can someone be 1,000 words per minute? That is so hard. That is true, and that's a professional speed reader. So realistically, the way I think about it is most students in the exam, like 80% of them are going to be about 240 to 300. Some students who train and do well are going to be 350, 400. Some really good students are going to be 500, 600. No one's really going to be above 600 because they're people who professionally trained to be speed readers. So it's crazy, but it's not something that we need to worry about. I'll send everyone the link in the chat. Reading Soft. And so have a go on that website, have a look, and once you've got your reading speed, post it in the chat. If you don't want to send it to everyone, direct message it to me, and we'll see where everyone's starting point is. One student asking, when did I do the exam? I did the exam, so I graduated in 2015. So I did it in 15, 14, 13, 12. Maybe it was 2011, which is a long time ago. And which tutor did I use? I used a lot of different preparations, really all the common ones I attended alongside doing stuff on my own. Mish is at 851 words per minute. Wow. 701 words per minute, 709. Looks like a lot of students are getting very high scores. I'll give everyone 30 seconds more and then we'll keep going. Perfect. So students got very high scores. And the interesting thing is this is what always happens when we do these types of tests. The reality is that if you sat a test in like an official laboratory setting, most of us probably wouldn't be expert speed readers, but when we do the test ourselves, often is the standard is a bit higher, which is okay. We can compare it to ourselves. Like you can compare your improvement with these methods to yourselves. But the reason why, I think all of us have speed read the text rather than taking lots of time to read and comprehend it exactly. So what would happen from here is if I asked everyone and I actually tested you on your knowledge on that information of the test, of that information that you've read, a lot of us probably wouldn't be able to remember much. And that's because there's really two key elements to reading speed. One element is obviously the speed, but the other element is comprehension. And that's not spelled correctly, so we'll just fix that up. But so everyone's done pretty well on this test in terms of speed, but my guess is that because you've all tried to do it as fast as you can to get a really good score, comprehension was definitely less than normal, probably not good at all for most of you. And so 240 words per minute is generally the average for when someone has good comprehension, and that's the fastest they go. I'm sure some of you may be slightly higher, might be 300, might be a bit more. But the key thing with reading speed is speed and comprehension. We can all just race through a piece of text. We're trying to read it as fast as possible and not really understand anything. But we want the mixture of both. And this is where this technique comes in really, really handy. Which really the biggest thing that wastes time when you're reading is regression. And this is where you're rereading the same line multiple times. Why do we reread the same line multiple times? We don't do it for fun. We do it because we didn't comprehend it. And so when we're doing speed reading, often we don't reread lines very much because we're not worrying as much about comprehension. We're just racing as fast as we can. And so when we are really reading something for understanding, and you would have noticed, particularly with some of these pieces, these ones, a lot of us would have had to reread it a few times because it's so difficult to understand that you have to read it a few times to really comprehend it. And so being able to avoid that, being able to avoid reading things multiple times, regression, as they say, is one of the biggest ways of saving time. For most readers, more than 25% of time is spent rereading words, which when we read some of those difficult pieces, that's definitely understandable, it probably would have been more. And this really is a habit that keeps you stuck at the same reading speed. And so essentially a very, very simple thing, which I recommend just take it and just do it. It's been proven in studies to improve your reading speed. It's where you get your finger, and as you're reading, you pace with your finger across the page. So for example, on here, I'd pace across here, pace across here, pace across here with my finger. That's been proven to increase your reading speed by about 25%. So it's not doubling it or tripling it, but it's making a pretty sizable impact, which is really good. And so, got a few questions. Again, when did you do the exam? I answered this one when students were maybe doing the test, but I did the exam back in, I think it was around 2011. And in terms of which tutors I went to, I just went to all the popular ones back then, which were most of the same popular ones now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try using this method on a question. And so you're going to be getting the question, you're going to get your finger, go through, read line by line if you have to read the passage, and we'll see how that makes an impact. And we've got a question here from Dominic. When we do that strategy, do we scan through the info with our cursor quickly or slowly? Yeah, so basically the way I would use this strategy is this is why it's step 3 in the process, which is, it's a good call out, Dominic, to call this out. But whenever I get approached with a question, the first thing I'd always do is read the question first. That's always the case. Then I would look for keywords and try and use the scan method. If that doesn't work, or if I can immediately tell that the scan method just isn't adequate because it's asking for more information than what I can scan, maybe it's a poem, maybe it's asking for the theme, then that's when you have to read the passage. And if you do have to read the passage, ideally you can just read some of the passage, but that's when I would use this method, because that's going to mean you're going to be able to read it faster. So what we're going to do on this one is we're not going to actually focus on finding the answers. We're just going to focus on using that method. And so I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds now, and just get your finger on the screen rather than the cursor. Get your finger on the screen and practice using this method to increase your reading speed. And so I'm going to give you 30 seconds to read this passage. Let's go. When you've done reading it, put done in the chat box. Done. Awesome stuff, Colin, Addie, Bill. Perfect. Looks like everyone's done. So what I'm going to do is I'll send you more questions like this one, which you can go through on your own after the session. But really, we won't go through the answers with this one just because we're running a bit over time. But the key thing was, just using your finger as a visual pacer, running it through over each sentence is a really good way of increasing your reading speed. One other method, which is also really, really good, is this. And really one of the biggest roadblocks to reading speed is subvocalization. And what this means is most of us speak out each word as if we're physically speaking it when we read it. So for example, if we look at this passage, most people will say, if you look at my lips, when they're reading it, they'll be like, so they won't be saying the words, but in their head, they'll be speaking it out. And what that means is that your reading speed is limited to your ability to speak. And if we said, what's faster, your ability to speak or your ability to think or your ability to listen? Obviously, we can think much faster. The speed that we can think at is much faster than the speed that we can read at and actually speak at. And so what that means is by eliminating this inner voice, by eliminating that need to speak each word out and just eliminating that in general, it really does open up reading speed drastically. This is one of the biggest things that the really good people do at reading speed. They're able to remove the need to speak out each word, and it really does open up how quickly you can speak. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this video with you all. Two questions: is McRob better or Suzanne Corey? It really depends on what you're looking for. McRob is generally a little bit more competitive to get into, but they are both good. I'm just going to get this video up on the screen now, and it really just explains how this is a powerful way of increasing your reading speed.
It's midnight, you're getting ready for bed, but you realize you forgot to do your 100-page reading assignment. You wish there was some way you could just fly through it. Well, there it is. You have to stop sub-vocalizing. Don't say the words in your head as you read along. You can listen to music or use your finger to help you accomplish this. Instead, and this will sound a bit weird, try to see the words as shapes and let your eyes scan them as you glide over the lines of a book. Here's what I mean. It's midnight, you're getting ready.
So what I'm going to do is I will send this video in the chat, and I will also send through a few more resources around sub-vocalization in general. How did people feel about that? Did that make sense? How you can use that to increase reading speed? Or is that a topic which you would want to deep dive a little bit more on? Yes, sort of. Yeah. Makes sense. So what we'll do is we'll send through a bit more information about that. And it is something that really I'd recommend practicing yourself. The last thing really to focus on with reading speed is the more you read, the faster you'll be able to learn, the faster you'll learn to read. And so a key habit from now until your exam really is to practice reading as much as you can every single day. If it's something that you can do for around 15 minutes a day, this is going to be a big advantage. And so I would do this if you can. Try reading passages that are more difficult, like the poems, like some of the more difficult texts you would see on the exam. And if you can practice that with using your finger as a pacer and with removing that sub-vocalization, that's going to give you a big advantage. So like 10, 11 days, that's enough time to train and get really good at these things. And so I would really focus on that as a habit between now until your exam. And so what we're going to do now, one final thing before we wrap up, is just a tip which I'll really focus on as being something which is something that trips up a lot of students, a reading habit for success. So obviously one of the habits we talked about was doing 15 minutes of reading every single day, making sure you focus on using your finger as a visual pacer without sub-vocalization, and just making it a habit. The more you read, the faster your reading speed is going to get. So I would really make sure to do that. The other tip which I would have, particularly for this exam, is be very careful with levels of certainty in the question. So what you'll often see is you'll see some answers say always, never, or impossible. And so we'll say this is always the case, or this is never the case, this is impossible. Be very careful when they use these words, because the level of certainty it's suggesting is that it has to always be the case or it can never be the case. And so it's going to be naturally harder for things to meet these requirements. And so if you see an answer with these words, be skeptical. And if a question asks for these words, you're going to have to look for a specific answer. On the other hand, if you see a response which says like this may be the case, or possibly, or suggest, or likely, you can just note down in your head that the level of certainty required here is much less. And so the standard of proof required for that answer is less. And so this is just something to take into consideration when you're reading questions. For example, here it says which words or phrases contribute to creating a sense of enchantment and wonder. If it said which words definitely contribute, it could have had a slightly different meaning. So just be really careful about that. It wasn't so relevant to this question, but just when you're reading the questions, think about what level of certainty is it requiring from you, and how does that dictate what answer they're looking for. The other tip, which is something we've talked about, is understand that within the piece that you're reading, key pieces of information are going to be housed in different parts. For example, with narrative questions, understand the structure of this piece. So for example, at the start of a narrative, often that's where they're going to be introducing the character, some of the key plot points, the setting. So if it asks for that information, look at the start of the piece. Same thing if it's looking for a conclusion or takeaways, probably at the end of the piece. It's looking for some conflict or some meat to the argument, probably in the middle of the piece. And same thing for non-fiction pieces. So we want to understand the structure of these type of non-fiction pieces. Often there's going to be an introduction at the start, conclusion at the end, some sort of meaty arguments in the middle. And you can really use this to your advantage because they do often follow these set structures. And it can mean you can zone on these sections without having to read the whole piece. So just before we move on, we have a few questions. We've got a few students asking if we can stay on longer. Unfortunately, we're already running quite a bit over time. And so what I will do is I'll send out an email after this session with the homework, which we're going to run through next. But you'll also have the chance where if you have questions or if you have something you want to clarify, feel free to send it through and I will make sure to get in contact with you. And so next steps from here, well, what have we covered? We've covered firstly an intro, which is a quick overview of the reading section of the exam, number one. Then we went through how to master the three types of, or the passage types of questions which you see on the exam. We went through the 3 steps. So look at the question first, then use the scan method, and then use speed reading if required. We look at a few tips and quick tricks very quickly. And so the question is, what can you do from here to maximize your reading performance? Well, we have created some homework for you to maximize your study and exam performance from here. One of them is we've compiled a bunch of resources for you to complete. One of them is 10 long passages and questions, which you can really go through on your own and get some more practice. So we'll send that through to you tomorrow. Same thing, we'll send you through the slides from today with the key takeaways on these 3 key steps. And we'll also make the recording available of this session